So, so the title for this week, as Swamiji is talking about this in this reading, is about spiritual failure, which is the main thing. What is a spiritual failure? And there were three keywords which I was picking up in this one, because that is how you can quickly grasp the whole thing by just picking up keywords. Failure, spiritual failure, and he talks of devotion as the oil in the lamp, and also that ultimately that every failure is temporary. So what is a spiritual failure? So I was thinking that in this reading, what he's talking is that someone who fails to tune in to the Christ consciousness, someone who is not keeping the lamp of devotion burning, someone as a devotee who is busy in the mundane chores, but he's forgetting why are we here, or let us say, what is the main purpose behind whatever we have been given, whatever is the goal for all of us. So as I was looking at it, the spiritual failure, if we see that it is nothing but if we fail to tune into Christ consciousness. But is Christ consciousness available on only certain occasions, or is it that it is going to come on a special occasion, only on Christmas, or only when we are talking to Christ? But it is not like that. If you see, Christ consciousness or the divine consciousness or divine mother's consciousness is always available to us. Somebody asked Swamiji, as I was listening to one of the satsangs, he said, who is divine mother, and what is the role of divine mother in Ananda? That was a very interesting question. And Swamiji explained, once he started explaining, almost in 1 hour satsang, he talks about only one question for 40 minutes. And then he said, Divine Mother is not somebody who is on the altar, and we keep a beautiful idol over there, which is just an image to remind us of the Divine Mother. But who is in essence Divine Mother? We sang a chant to Divine Mother also this evening. And he said, Divine Mother is nothing but it's our inner consciousness, that aspect of consciousness which is all loving, which is all forgiving, which is all compassion, which is always accepting everybody, even whatever faults and mistakes which keep happening. So irrespective of that. So it is that aspect of our consciousness. And in that sense, he said, Divine Mother is you. And Divine Mother is playing this role and drama through all of us. So in a way, that outer image of Divine Mother is nothing but an image to remind us that that Divine Mother is right within me, and I have to just make an effort to tune into that consciousness. So what is a spiritual failure? Spiritual failure, you may say, is when we fail to tune in to that aspect of consciousness. When we are, that is why in the prayer, if you see, when we started, we say, okay, beloved God, great gurus, we are your children. Help us to tune in to your consciousness, to your presence. And very interestingly, the 12th chapter, if you see in Bhagavad Gita, is all about that what should we do as a devotee. And then Krishna says, okay, the first thing you should do is that you should live in my consciousness. But, when I started reading Bhagavad Gita, I just could not understand what does it mean to live in Krishna's consciousness, because it's a maybe a high and a very abstract subject. And how can we learn it and understand it? What does it mean? And then Krishna himself comes down a little. He said, okay, if you don't understand how to live in my consciousness, he says, live in my thoughts. So thoughts we can relate to, yeah, because we all have to encounter, and we are so busy in our minds with thoughts. Thoughts are always roaming. So he said, and that we can understand, okay, can I think of Krishna all the time? Or can I live in the thoughts of Krishna? That we can understand. And he said, and before we go to the next step, where Krishna says, okay, if you can't even do that, then he gives another step. But if you see, we should, for a moment, just ponder. And Swami also said this thing in the satsang, that are we more conscious when we are thinking, or are we more conscious when we are not thinking? Because thoughts are something which are coming from consciousness, or are nothing but vibration of consciousness, as Yogananda said. But consciousness, when the mind is absolutely silent, when there are no thoughts, when we meditate, are we not more conscious during that time? Because thoughts create restlessness in the mind. So even when you say, okay, I'm thinking, yes, you are conscious, but we are less so as compared to when we are not thinking and when we are absolutely quiet, when mind is absolutely quiet. So then in that order, he says, okay, if you can't do this, then the next step comes. So let us say, let us take this first step that, okay, if we have to tune in and we have to live as a devotee in the consciousness of God, then how can we do that? And what are the main obstacles? If you see, the basic obstacle, which doesn't allow us to live in that consciousness or in that spirit, is nothing but the restlessness of the mind, because the mind is always, trying to grab something. Somebody, I was listening to a very beautiful talk. That person is a monk. He's not from our order, but he said, just because we have legs, should we keep walking all the time? Or just because we have hands, should we keep grasping all the time? And he said, no, it's not mandatory that we should always be doing that. And just because we have mind, should we keep thinking all the time? So that is the thing which he was trying to tell everybody, that mind is a tool. And it's not, but the common problem is that we are hardly ever we allow the mind to take rest. And that's the reason when we are not able to grasp the consciousness which is right behind the mind, but we are not able to enjoy that, or when we are not able to tune into that. That is why this chant we were singing, what is this consciousness flowing through my brain? Can it be other than divine? Because we are talking of power, we are talk power in the will, we are talking about the energy of the form, we are talking about the life flowing through our veins, but we just forget that. And although everybody is conscious, everything is conscious, and here somebody just said, God is hiding in the open, and because he's hiding in the open, we are not able to grasp him. So if we understand that the whole spiritual path is nothing but it's a passage, or it's a journey to quieten the mind. So in that way, the more quiet the mind, the more naturally we will be tuning into the consciousness of the God. And we will be talking about an affirmation in the end, which Swami actually said, what is the underlying reality? So what are the tools available to quieten the restless mind? One of the easiest tools, which you all practice this evening as you came for seva, because Krishna also came in that order, that, okay, if you're not able to live in my consciousness, live in my thoughts. But if you're not able to live in my thoughts, he said, give all your intentions and the fruits of your action to me. Which is actually, because sometimes we are not able to keep the thoughts, but actions we are all doing. So if we offer, when you came for seva, so you offered the action to God, that, okay, I'm coming today, I will offer all the work that I'm doing in the service of God. So that becomes one of the ways to. And when we all were doing this seva, you were actually enjoying that spirit and the God. In your mind also, you were thinking about God for at least some part of the seva, and you were offering your actions to him. So Krishna said, okay, if you do this much, that also will take you to the higher goal. And finally he said, if you are not able to do this much also, then you can give me all your failures. That, okay, because every time we keep failing in something or the other, but he said, give me your failures. Even if you see, this is a temporary failure, as Swami said. We failed in the tuning into the consciousness, and we are failing maybe 100 times in a day, because we come down from that state, we continue to get engrossed in the work, and we forget about God. So it's a kind of failure, but it's a temporary failure. So rather than beating yourself down, he said, give me your failure. Okay, so I give you. And Yogananda said that even when you say that, God, you make that mistake, God is happy. So rather than beating yourself down, feeling guilty for whatever it is, he said, first of all, never feel guilty about anything, or never feel that you have made that you are a sinner. Maybe mistakes have happened, but you don't call yourself a sinner. That is what Yogananda was saying. And Swami actually quoted a very beautiful incident which happened in Yogananda's life, where there was this lady in the church who was saying, kneel down, come on your knees, because you are a sinner. And everybody was, coming on the kneeling down, and Yogananda was alone, who was standing in the church. And because Yogananda said, I cannot accept this fact that I'm a sinner. So he said, I was the only person in the church who was standing. Everybody was kneeling down. And this lady was furious that, why are you not kneeling down? Are you not a sinner? He said, I am not a sinner. I will not accept this fact that I am a sinner. Yes, mistakes will happen. But if you see the second path, which will help us understand this point better, that, okay, how to beat the restless mind. One is the karma yoga, which we all practiced this evening. The next step which we can take is to love God. And that is nothing but bhakti yoga. So when we love God, naturally, if you see in that act of devotion, the mind starts calming down, because when you have more of heart quality, as reason follows the feeling, Swami said, when we have more of feeling, when we do chanting, suddenly those unnecessary thoughts and ripples of thoughts, they start quietening. That is another way to do it. The third way which we practice is by dhyana yoga, which is, and we have wonderful tools for that. Kriya yoga is one. So where the basic science behind kriya yoga is that it is difficult to control the mind, but it is easy to grasp the breath. So if we control the breath, we can control the mind. And there also, if you see, kriya yoga is a wonderful technique. It's a technique which is handed over down to down to us by sages. And many times, people ask this question, how many kriyas we should do, or especially when we are young kriyavans. And this is the thing. And somebody asked this question to Swamiji also. And Swamiji gave a very beautiful answer. He said, first of all, there can never be a generalization, because it cannot be a general rule that for different people, it can be a different thing. But one universal thing which can be applied to this rule is that how many of those kriyas are we able to do with 100% devotion? Because if we are not doing, or if the devotion is dropping, maybe we should do less, because otherwise it will become a mechanical activity. So if you see, kriya is a wonderful tool to quieten the mind, provided we are using the devotion aspect to it. So something, or the number which you can do with reverence, and comfortable, you're comfortable with it is just the right number for you. So you should forget what your neighbor is doing or what the other person is doing. Finally, the last thing, which comes in controlling the mind or keeping the mind quiet, is about dhyana yoga, which is actually it's a subject which we talk little less about, but it's a kind of icing on the cake, you may say, because when we keep going in that direction, karma yoga, bhakti, dhyan. And in jnana yoga, if you see, what is happening is that you are going beyond the mind itself, where we are trying to quieten the mind. But if you go beyond the mind, then mind has no control over you. You come and you stay in your natural state. And how does that happen? Because if you see, in mind, there are four components we call man, buddhi, chitta, and ahankar. And man is, even the modern psychology has no concept about it. I am a medical a practitioner, but medicine has no understanding about these concepts. But Indian Vedic system has. So mind has these four components, where perception is just imagery, which is falling on the mind, and it has nothing to do. Mind cannot understand, but intellect helps you to understand. Okay, he is so and so person. This is a microphone. So this is a subject of intellect. So perception is just images falling. And then comes the chitta, which is nothing but the feeling aspect. And there is also a component, what we call memories. If you see, sometimes, even if there is no impression coming to us from outside, but memories keep running in the mind. So they also come from aspect of buddhi, you may say, because those are the past images, past impressions, which our mind is keeping. And the ego is the fourth function, which is nothing but which keeps everything attributing to itself. Okay, this is mine. These are my feelings. This is my memory, or this is my thought. This is my umbrella, or this is my this thing. A very interesting thing happened. I was talking to one very senior gentleman, and he was sharing about a person who actually started losing his memory. And if you see, memory is a function of the mind. And we have discussed that mind is nothing but a tool, just like we have hands and legs and eyes and nose, we have mind also. So if you see the function of the mind, which this person was losing, there was a very interesting component to it. This person was only losing the negative memories of the past, which were the bad memories, because memories are sometimes good and bad, both. So this person was actually losing only the bad memories, and this person was not remembering what sometimes that person used to get anxious about it or fearful about it or not able to, uh, have a good relation with somebody. And suddenly, at this fag end of his life, he started losing all those memories which were kind of disturbing him throughout his life. And this gave me a very beautiful insight that, okay, just look at this, for throughout our lives, we are keeping these memories, somehow very sacred, and as if, they are the only things which define us. But for a moment, understand that if everything goes in a flash, and for many people, it actually happened. It happened with Kamala de Silva, who was a very advanced disciple of Yogananda. She went to a complete memory loss during the last stages of her life. All she was remembering was that Yogananda was her guru, and that is all. And somebody came to Swamiji and they said, "So Swamiji, isn't it sad that she has lost everything?" And Swami said, "Why can't you?" She said, you are just making so much noise about what she has lost. You are not understanding what she has got." And that is something, we have to understand, that for a moment, even practice this. Maybe you are a mathematician in this life. Maybe you're a doctor. Maybe you're a businessman, engineer. But all this is a skill that we acquired in this life. It's a mental skill. It's a mental game only. We start this journey from 11th, 12th, and then, start grasping some of these skills. But overnight, if let us say the skill goes away, what will happen? So maybe if I'm putting all my eggs in one basket, or maybe let's say if I'm identifying myself with only that quality or that part of my personality, but I'm not that. If you see what dissection we have done, is that I am not the mind doesn't define me. Memory is just a function of mind. If everything goes still, I'm there. So that is why in Jnana Yoga, what we do is that when we are meditating, we are trying to shut down everything. We shut down the body, we sit quiet, there is no bodily movement. We shut down the senses, and we slowly go and shut the mind too. There is no ripple of thought in the mind. But then what is it? You hit a blankness over there, but that blankness is still, in that blankness, you're conscious. Isn't that so? Isn't it so? We don't become unconscious. But from where is that consciousness coming? That consciousness, you understand that awareness is an underlying reality which will always be there. That's eternal existence. That is why we call existence, consciousness, and bliss. These are the fundamental reality of this life, Sachidananda. So in that state, you realize that you are conscious. That consciousness has taken of individual form in your role. So you are nothing but an individualized expression of that consciousness. Otherwise, that eternal consciousness, who has created it? Certainly we have not created it. That consciousness is our deeper eternal reality. And all our endeavor, if you see, as a spiritual, on the spiritual path, as a disciple, as a devotee, is just to remain in contact with that underlying current. And when we stay tuned to that reality, to that consciousness, then you are always doing what is to be, what a devotee or a disciple has to do. And if we fall, that is a spiritual failure. So for a spiritual failure, if you see, is nothing but to fall from that state of remembrance, you may say, because otherwise that consciousness is always there. The moment we disconnect from there, that is the time when we start feeling the trouble. But isn't it available all the time? You can go back in that moment itself. So you don't lose anything, but all we have to do is just dive deep into it. Or if you see, what probably, this is my understanding and I can be wrong here also, that cervical samadhis, in cervical samadhi, you are trying to do by closing the eyes, and you are trying to go and shut down everything, and you are remaining in that state of consciousness without any ripple of thought. But in nirvikalp samadhi, you are active in the world, but you are still keeping the contact with that undercurrent all the time, even if you are doing whatever you are doing, whatever is your role. And this is what Rajrishi Janakananda used to say, that even in your action, a part of you is always is behind the scenes. Part of you is behind, and I'm paraphrasing it because I'm not remembering exactly the words what he said. So what he wanted to say was that from inside you see that consciousness is the same, because when you will dive down, you will touch the same consciousness as I will dive down, or at anybody here. And that portion of consciousness is the same. So in that reality, you understand that everything is one. And that is the way he said you can touch omnipresence. That consciousness, if you stay with that, you will slowly continue to go into that oneness.